Rescue the Rescuer, the show that focuses on helping first responders who may be experiencing challenges such as addiction, PTSD, relationship failure, and more. We use stories of struggle and recovery to highlight successful survival strategies for those in this powerfully stressful field of work. And now, here's your host, Stephen Kavalkovich.
Hey everyone, this is Stephen. Thanks for joining me on the show. I'm a former paramedic in long-term recovery from addiction and post-traumatic stress disorder. I've created this podcast to help others who may be experiencing a story similar to mine find a path beyond their problems and towards a life that they deserve. Before we get started with today's episode, let's hear this short message from one of my supporters. Don Prince is a former firefighter from New York. He's also the co-founder of the 11th Hour Trauma Retreat. The 11th Hour Trauma Retreat specializes in PTSD and trauma-intensive therapy sessions in a private and discreet setting. Please contact them at 855-820-8105 or at 11thhourretreat.org. All right, thanks again for joining me, and let's get started with today's show. So how am I going to get you guys to trust me? Well, I figure one of the best ways is for you to get to know me. So I'm going to tell you my story. I grew up in South Jersey. I was a triplet. I was the last one born, so we had three of us. Unfortunately, we lost one at birth. He was a little bit too small, and I happened to be the last one. So it was my brother who's alive today, the middle one, and that we unfortunately lost, and myself. And for some reason, I don't know why, I don't know where it came from, but from a very young age, all the way back to where I can remember, I knew that I was different. I knew that I wasn't just a typical boy. I actually felt that I was essentially the crap left over. If you ever saw the movie Twins with Danny DeVito and Arnold Schwarzenegger back from the 80s, there was these two guys, we had Schwarzenegger, who we all know is a big muscle-bound person, and then you had Danny DeVito, who's the exact opposite. So the movie premise was that they made Schwarzenegger's character to be the perfect specimen of a human being. And they told DeVito's character in the movie that he was the crap left over. For some reason, I identified with that when I first saw that movie, or I identified with those feelings. And I can't tell you exactly where they started, but I carried them around for a long time. As I said before, I wasn't your typical boy. I was awkward. I was strange. I didn't like sports. I didn't like tools. I didn't like cars. I didn't like baseball cards. I didn't like boy things. I was just different. I was more into listening to musicals. My dad would take me to see Phantom of the Opera or, any kind of Broadway show. And I really loved the performance. I loved that kind of stuff. I loved watching old episodes of I Love Lucy when I was a kid, and I still do. I just knew that I was different. Well, when I was around the age of 10 years old, I decided that I wanted to play football, not because I liked football. Not because I liked any sport at all. Actually, prior to that, I was in soccer camp in the summertime when I was a little bit younger, and my mom had to pick me up at noon on the first day because I cried so much all morning. I just wasn't into sweating. I didn't want to get dirty. I didn't want to play sports. It wasn't me. But my dad liked sports. He was really into them. And I wanted to please my dad, as any young child does. They want to please their parents, and I was no different. So I remember being a part of the football team, and I cried there every day. During practice, in the uniform, the heavy shoulder pads, the helmet, I would cry tears all day and night during every practice and every game. It just wasn't me. But again, I wanted to please my father. I wanted to please my family, my brother, my parents. But it just didn't work. for me. Well, we're going to go back. We're going to go a little bit further down. Now, when I was about 7th grade, I would say there was that point of time where, the hormones start raging, you start recognizing that girls don't have cooties, and I wanted to have a girlfriend. But I did it to an extreme. I wanted somebody to notice me. I wanted to be accepted by somebody. So I remember in 7th grade, I asked every single girl out in the entire grade within like a week. And obviously that wasn't the best way to become, a ladies' man for sure. I was just kind of a joke to everybody. And, I remember how that stuck with me. About 2 years later, I didn't say this before, but I had I was really thick Coke bottle glasses as a child. I was the first kid at 4 years old who got glasses. I'm extremely nearsighted. I still wear thick glasses, although thank God technology has gotten far enough to where I have contacts. But that was always an issue for me. I had acne. I was scrawny. I was a tiny little kid. I was just that kid that wasn't very popular. But I wanted to, as I said, I wanted to have a girlfriend, and that didn't work out. 9th grade, right before high school, I changed my clothes. I changed my hair. I got contact lenses. I started hanging out with kids who smoked cigarettes because I thought they were cool, or at least they accepted me, and maybe others would think I was cool too. First day of freshman year, girls started noticing me, and I learned 2 things. I internalized two thoughts. One was the fact that people are vain, and they're really interested in outside appearance. And 2, that, wow, girls notice me now. So I'm going to use, if anytime a girl gives me attention, I'm going to take advantage of it. And that carried on throughout many, many years and caused a lot of pain, not just for myself, but for a lot of other people, because it was almost like unconsciously like a revenge thing, I guess, because I didn't get noticed before and now they did. So I'm going to get you back, I guess. I don't think I actually really thought that, but somewhere inside, that's my psyche was thinking that, obviously, in the underlying areas of my mind and subconscious. Well, around 14 years old, I got introduced. I moved to a new school, and this was around that same time. And the guidance counselor introduced me to this kid who was supposed to be like my buddy, to show me around and kind of be like somebody to be a friend. Well, he was a kid that wore Jesus t-shirts. He carried a Bible around. He was just that, he preached to everybody, and I thought, man, he's weird. But you know what? He's nice. I'm weird too, and he seems to like me, and he seems to accept me, so I hang out with him. Well, he brought me to a youth group, and that youth group was a very popular type group in the area. A lot of kids from the school went there, and there happened to be a leader there who was very charismatic. He seemed to be very popular. He was funny. He was a little bit older. He drove a car, and we were all a little bit younger. We didn't have license yet. So I remember thinking, man, if I could get this guy to like me, everybody likes him, so maybe they'll like me by proxy. That's what I thought. Well, he actually did accept me into his circle. And there happened to be a time a few months later where I was hanging out at his house, and he was going to take a few of us to the mall, get pizza. I don't remember exactly, but 2 of the guys that were at the house that day that were my age went outside. I don't know if they were going to smoke a cigarette. I don't know. But it just wound up being me and this gentleman in the house. And I say gentleman very loosely. He suddenly jumped right on top of me, and he was a lot bigger than me. And he said, hey, you know what? We can't go to the mall until I get to play with you. And I know it wasn't like, let's play chess or checkers. It was, let's do something. He was going to try to do something sexual. Fortunately for me, the door opened. Some of the guys came in the house. They didn't actually witness what happened, but whatever was going to happen stopped. However, I carried that around immediately. I felt, what did I do wrong? I'm confused. I'm just at that adolescent confusion, trying to figure myself out stage. I don't know. I don't understand what's going on. And I didn't know what to do with it. So I kept quiet for a few weeks, but it really bothered me. And I kept going to the group, but I was just uncomfortable. Finally, I broke, and I told that Jesus t-shirt wearing kid that first introduced me to this group, and I told him what happened. He told his mother. She told somebody who happened to be on the board of this national Christian organization, and I'm not going to mention their name. So they had a meeting. They brought us, my parents and the board members from Washington, D.C. or wherever came up from this thing. And they met us at a church in my town. And the church was called Prince of Peace Church. Ironically, probably, I guess about 20 years later, a little bit less than, I would start going to NA and Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous meetings in that very same room that we had that meeting. So, we'll get to that later. But they came in, they listened to my story, and they basically said, well, we don't believe you. It really didn't happen. This guy denies it. So why don't we just forget the whole thing? And my parents at the time didn't really know what to do. This was before a lot of the Catholic Church scandals, so nobody really knew what was going on. And they didn't know how to handle it. So it just got dropped. And I got dropped. I got abandoned. I felt shame. I felt guilt. And not only that, but all the kids that really liked this guy, now they became my enemies. They all wanted, they thought, what are you trying to jam our friend up? You're just a loser. All those things that they said. And I internalized those as well, of course. I just, I didn't know what to do. So next came the point where I decided that I really need to find some kind of acceptance somewhere. So I would join any club, any group of friends that would accept me, because I didn't know who I was, and I felt so abandoned that I just didn't want to be alone. So I started hanging out with people that did things that, not drugs or alcohol, but just things that I just maybe would not have wanted to be a part of. But if they accepted me, I would say okay, because again, I didn't want to be alone. I felt so isolated in this big, scary world now. This world where I definitely I finally found out that there were bad people in the world that did bad things. And around that time, maybe a couple months later, I got to meet a cheerleader. She was one of my first girlfriends. She was beautiful. We dated for a really, really long time, really long high school relationship. I think it was about a week long, because that's pretty much how long relationships last in high school. We dated, and then we did that thing you're supposed to do after you break up in high school. We hated each other. We talked trash about each other. We would give each other dirty looks when we'd see each other in the hallway, and we carried this on for a few months because of our immaturity. Just so happens in December of that year, I got to stand next to her at a choir at a church for Christmas time. We were singing, and they just happened to place us next to each other. And we haven't spoken in months. And I remember distinctly, just like it was yesterday, thinking, man, I should apologize to this girl, because you never know what could happen. But my pride, my ego, my fear of more rejection and more abandonment kept me from doing it. And unfortunately, about an hour later, that poor girl was killed in a car accident. And immediately I blamed myself. Now, we know that I didn't cause it. I know that. I knew it even then, but I felt that I had to blame myself, because what if I had apologized? What if I'd taken the time? Maybe she wouldn't have been in the car when that other car hit her. All those things I didn't know what to do with. So I was, again, more shame, more guilt, more abandonment, more all those emotions that I just didn't know what to do with. But I did find that the local fire department was accepting junior members. And I said, you know what? That's what I'm going to do. I want to give back. I want to be a part of this, because I can maybe help somebody. Little did I realize, it took me 20 years to realize it, that I actually subconsciously became a rescuer at that time, or I started the path to becoming a rescuer, because nobody was there to rescue me when the thing happened with that youth leader, or when people abandoned me in other ways of my childhood, or made me feel abandoned. I didn't realize it, but that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to become a rescuer because nobody rescued me. So I joined the fire department. I found a place where I could be accepted, where I could have a name. I could be, I could have a position of somewhat authority, I guess you would call it. And I got a badge, got a uniform, I got a pager that I got to wear on my belt, a blue light. I got to leave school when there was a bad accident. I was the man. That's what I thought. So I did that. That's where you'd find me for the next 2 years, the firehouse, all day, every day. Responding to emergencies, loving the adrenaline rush, loving the opportunity to be a part of that circle, that club that seems so exclusive to me. So I did that for a while, decided that I was going to go to paramedic school. And that was in Philadelphia in 2000. Around that time, I was about 18 years old. And, I started drinking just like an 18-year-old does, partying in the woods with some friends or smoking some marijuana once in a while or, stuff like that. Innocent stuff, recreational stuff. However, I didn't really realize it then, but whenever the drinking party was over, I wanted to continue because it was the first time I experimented with any kind of substance, I realized, wow, not only is this fun and I'm accepted and I'm a little bit more loose to kind of be a little, just feel a little bit more free, but I don't actually feel a lot of that emotional pain that I've been carrying around. So it was a perfect storm. So I started drinking a little bit more and a little bit more. Like I said, paramedic school started, and around that time I found marijuana, and I really, really loved it. So much so that every single day during paramedic school on my lunch break, I would go out and smoke a joint with a fellow classmate. Come in blazed up, never read a single book in school. Somehow I just managed to maintain to take the information in and actually remember it, to retain it. This is an interesting point. Spring of that year, spring of 2001, this was a few months before 9/11. I was doing my internship at the hospital in Philly, and we had drug reps come in from from Purdue Pharma. They came in when I was doing a hospital day, hospital hours. They came in, they brought in tons of food. They sat us down for lunch. Again, it was Purdue Pharma, and it was the first time they were bringing Oxycontin to the market. And they said, this is going to be the greatest painkiller ever, best thing ever, no problems, no addiction. It's the miracle pill. Well, everybody believed it. The drug rep said it. We all believed it. It sounded cool. Unfortunately, 16 years later, we sit here talking about these things that we're going to get to. We sit here with the largest opiate addiction, suicide, substance abuse epidemic that's ever been seen ever in this world. It's no coincidence to me. Now 9/11 happens. That morning I get a phone call. I was at home. My brother woke me up as the first tower hit and the news came on, and he said, you got to get up. I woke up, I looked at the screen, and I saw the towers on fire and the planes and the whole thing. I called my firehouse and I said, what are we doing? Can we go up? We have to go. And they said, pack a bag and get up here. So I did. I ran up there as quick as I could. They took 6 of us and said, you guys we're going to send you guys up to New York. So we took a line of ambulances up to Ground Zero around 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock that afternoon or so. And we drove up the New Jersey Turnpike in a caravan of ambulances. I'll never forget the sight when we saw the skyline for the first time on the New Jersey Turnpike. I think it's around exit 12 or so. We saw the skyline, the smoke rising, the towers weren't there. People were pulled over on the side of the road. Some of them were saluting us. The other ones were staring at the skyline, baffled and dumbfounded, not knowing what to do or say. Never forget that sight. We got to Giant Stadium where we basically staged there until we figured out what we were doing. Eventually, I wound up on a boat to Ground Zero. If you heard the intro episode, I spoke a little bit about that. I spoke about the powerlessness. I'm not going to get into that again. You can listen to the first episode to hear a little bit about that. But I spoke about the powerlessness that I felt for the first time in my life. But here's something that you won't hear on the radio, you won't hear on the news, and you probably never have, but we're going to talk about it right now. We took a boat over from from Jersey City over to Manhattan. And there was alcohol on that boat. There was about 100 firefighter cops, military, paramedics, civilians, anybody who wanted to help. We all got on that boat. It was about a 20-minute ride across the river, and everybody was getting drunk. Everybody was coping with alcohol because it was there. It was a way to calm the nerves. We didn't know what we were going into. We didn't know what we were going to see. So there you have it. You don't hear that on the news, but that's what happened. That's how common certain coping mechanisms, however destructive they may be, are when we're faced with indescribable amounts of tragedy, trauma, and terror. So, came back from Ground Zero. I spent a few days there. Unfortunately, there was nobody to help at that time. And, of course, that devastated me, but it's the truth. Got there, came back, and that's when my that's when my drinking started taking off more, because I was having trouble sleeping. I was having nightmares from the things that I had seen. I just didn't know what to do. I was so scared. I started becoming terrified. Started taking Xanax or any kind of pill that I could take to just quell the voices, the sounds, the sights that were still playing in my head, or the feelings that I was feeling. And it just kept getting worse. Took a few paramedic jobs, lost a few paramedic jobs. I kept running. I kept jumping from job to job, relationship to relationship. I started spending my money like crazy, money I didn't have. I got credit cards. I filed bankruptcy a week before I got married. I met a girl, and a week before I got married, I filed Chapter 7 bankruptcy for $40,000 in credit card debt, because I was trying to fill this God-shaped hole that I call it, this spirit-shaped hole, this hole that we try to fill with external things. I tried to fill it with money, with things, with cars, with jobs, with houses, with relationships, with food, sex, drugs, rock and roll. Any of those things on the outside I tried to fill, and none of it worked. So I wound up with an abortion. I had an abortion at that point as well. I met a girl, got married, took a job with the county in Delaware. 2 months later, a week before we signed for our first home, they fired me because of my behavior. I wouldn't conform. I thought I knew better. I was full of ego, attitude, and piss and vinegar. That's who I was. They fired me. I'm married. I don't know what to do. I took another job far away. I took a job back in New Jersey, but I had to travel far, so I was away half the week. I took a job as a medic in Atlantic City, seeing overdoses every day, all the time, carrying Narcan in our pockets, spending my night shift, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. on the streets of Atlantic City. 7:15 in the morning, I'm at the poker table playing poker, cheating on my wife, drinking alcohol, taking whatever pill or whatever smoking thing that I could, any drug I could, just to try to numb some kind of emotional pain that I was carrying from all these things I've already talked about. I wound up having a child, my son, and that was in 420 in 2008. So if you guys know about 420, I was a big pothead. 420, God has a sense of humor. My son was born on that day. A couple months later, the pills were starting to get out of hand, and I checked into a rehab for the first time. My family was supportive. My wife was supportive. Everybody was sending me cards and letters and telling me how proud of me they were, and how great it was that I was going to get help. I got care packages. I spent 30 days there. I was the number one student in rehab. I raised my hand. I listened. I was a community leader in the treatment center. I had a therapist who ran a first responder program at the time, who happened to be a convicted murderer. So this gentleman killed a guy in a bar on July 4th in 1982, I believe, in a blackout from being on drugs. Doesn't remember it to this day, but he did it in front of 100 witnesses. Spent 11 years in prison, got sober, became a therapist, and now I'm sitting across from him. So this convicted murderer is teaching me how to make my bed, do my laundry, and tell me how to live, and tell me how to be honest. But I hadn't felt any consequences from any of my issues. I kept skating by. I was using my family, my parents, to fuel my addiction. I would, lie, steal, manipulate, and cheat to get money, to try to pay this bill because I spent all my money at the casino, or I spent it on cocaine or pills or whatever. I wasn't ready to get honest, but I hadn't faced any consequences. Nobody caught me yet. And everybody thought that after 30 days in treatment, I would be okay. I was fixed. That's what they thought. That's what I thought. I was so ignorant, I didn't know. But I went to an NA meeting that night when I got home, and they said that's what you're supposed to do. So I went. I ran into a friend of mine. I was high on that cloud of, oh man, I just got out of rehab. Life's great. Everything's amazing. And he said to me, man, I don't think you're going to make it. I said, what is that supposed to mean? He said, well, you haven't felt any pain yet. And I haven't spoken to that guy in many years, but I said, you're full of crap. I just got out of rehab. I'm fine. Little did I know how dark the road was going to get. I did have to feel pain, because what I've learned is pleasure can motivate a little bit, but pain is a better motivator, and I hadn't felt any yet. I'd felt a lot of emotional pain from before, but I hadn't felt any pain from any consequences. So fast forward a little bit, more treatment centers. I went in and out to a couple treatment centers. My job at this point, the job in Atlantic City, I'd been there working for them for 7 years. They sent me to 2 treatment centers. I showed up on the 4th of July after the second treatment center. Showed up on the 4th of July to an overtime shift, high as a kite, and they finally let me go. And I kept, I manipulated my way into not losing my certification. So I took a job in another state, in another city in Trenton, New Jersey, where I had started my career, actually. But I took a job there, and I showed up high again. This time, the state took my certification, and I don't hold any ill will towards them because I was a danger to them and myself and everybody else around me. I was a danger to the patients, everybody. At this point, I was stealing pills from patients' houses. I was stealing the wasted narcotics. When we would give 6 milligrams of morphine and have 4 in the syringe, I'd steal it. Because at this point, it was just getting worse and worse and worse. I needed something more and more to make me be able to function at this point. I wound up having a daughter, and a few months later, I got divorced. Or I got separated from my wife because my wife had finally had it enough. We had to move into her parents' house. I hadn't paid the mortgage in a year. I hadn't done anything responsible to be a husband, a wife, a worker, a family member, a friend, a brother, a son, any of those things. An uncle. I wasn't any of those things. It was that bad. She said she wanted a divorce. Don't blame her. So the day she said she wanted a divorce, a few weeks later, I was leaving work because I was like, oh man, I really want to get her back. Let me see what I can do to get her back. I'm going to get sober. I'm going to go to treatment again. That's what I'm going to do. But I was so depressed. And she really said, I'm done. I'm going to send the paper, get the divorce papers. We're done. I remember leaving work that one of those nights, maybe a week later, so depressed I wanted to kill myself. And I remember leaving my job. I got in my car and I said to God, I made a little prayer. I said, God, I want to die, but I'm too afraid to do it myself. Can you have a car hit me on the way home? And truth is, as honest as I'm sitting here, a minute later, maybe 5 minutes, I'm driving down the road and bam, some kind of vehicle smacked my car, totaled it. Never saw him. There was nobody else on the road. By the time I blinked and my eye, and realized what happened, there was no other car. I didn't see anybody else. My car was totaled. I was uninjured. Be careful what you ask for, I guess. So I checked into treatment again, in and out of treatment, more and more pain. Got divorced officially, had my paramedic certification gone. And when it comes to getting into recovery, what I've really learned is a lot of it's about identity, a lot about living a life that's worth living, that we want to live, is about identity. I identified myself as a paramedic for a long time. I may have been a very sick paramedic and a very, coping in terrible ways, but I still had that thing to carry around. When I lost that, I didn't know who I was anymore. Because when people would ask me prior to that, who are you? Oh, I'm Steve. What do you do? Oh, I'm a paramedic. Notice I didn't say, I work as a paramedic. I am a paramedic. I didn't differentiate the fact that what I do is not who I am. However, that's what when I lost it, I didn't know who I was. And I took other menial jobs trying to figure out what I was going to do next. Got into a relationship with somebody else who I knew since high school. Moved in with her, cheated on her. The cycle continued, stole pills from her family, stole pills from anybody that I could, from my family, from anybody. Wound up moving out on her and cheating on her with an older woman because I thought that would help me. I thought that would make me feel better. I thought anything would make me feel better. I was sick, selfish, and self-centered. Well, I wound up having a surgery on my elbow. And I got on more painkillers. And after a week or two of being post-op, a surgeon generally cuts you off from the narcotics. So I came to a point where I had to buy pills on the street, but I had no job. So how am I going to do that? And truthfully, as I tell you, from being somebody who spent many years giving Narcan to heroin overdoses, I swore I would never do that. But this thing is not about knowing better or swearing you won't. It became a financial decision and a decision of desperation. A Percocet on the street or a Vicodin or an Oxy on the street was $30. A pill a bag of heroin was $10, $7 to $10. Became a financial decision. I said, as long as I don't inject it in my arm, I'll be okay. I'll just sniff it. That lasted a week, and a few weeks later, I overdosed. And when I overdosed, the paramedic who woke me up used to be an ex-partner. So somebody I used to work with is now on the other side of the stretcher giving me the same Narcan that we used to give to other people. But it didn't stop there. It just kept getting worse because I was addicted, and I had nothing else in my life. I had no peace. All I wanted to do was black out, and I kept going. Took other different jobs, tried all different things to try to make myself feel better. I tried therapy. I tried medications, convinced myself I was bipolar, anything. I tried everything, religion, yoga, any kind of therapy. But the bottom line was I wasn't ready to get honest about who I was. I wasn't ready to truly address the pain that I've been carrying around. Because the question when it comes to using a substance or any other kind of behavior that becomes a habit that's not so good, whether it be eating or drugs or gambling or sex or control or jobs, whatever that thing that we put all our eggs in that basket, it really comes down to not why the addiction or why do we do that. It's why the pain. And I had to get to that point where I had to address the underlying causes and conditions. And I didn't realize what they were. But these are the things the things I've been talking about. All those things I talked about from way back before I ever picked up a pill, a drug, or anything else. Once I finally decided that it was time to do that, that's when I started to get better. I became to a point where no one wanted me around. My family was at their wits' end. I pretty much killed my parents. They're still alive today, but I was killing them emotionally and financially from bailing me out of this jam or that jam or paying this ticket or paying for a lawyer or whatever. I had to go to multiple institutions. There's a saying in the rooms of Narcotics Anonymous. They say, jails, institutions, and death. Well, I had to go to many institutions. I died. I overdosed twice. I had 2 ex-paramedics, partners, on different occasions give me Narcan twice. And I was more terrified of death than I was of jail at the end. In the end, I was way more afraid of jail than I was of death. So in the end, I wound up going to jail. I wound up getting, I was so afraid of jail, but I got arrested in one of the worst precincts in the United States. They call it the Badlands, Kensington, Northeast Philadelphia. Got arrested there buying drugs, and I had to spend the night in jail. I had to experience it all because for some reason I was just made up to have to experience it all. Maybe that's why I'm here to share it with you, to share that you don't have to. Nobody under the sound of my voice that can hear me has to go down those roads. There is way out. And that's the thing too. There's multiple ways out. There's not a one size fits all, because whatever got you to wherever point you may have gotten with your pain, your brokenness, and your desperation is probably different than mine. The circumstances are different because we are different, but the feelings and the struggle and the hardship tend to be the same. The emotions tend to be the same, but we have to address those things if we want to get better. There's multiple ways, and we're going to talk about all those ways on upcoming episodes, because we're going to try to hit this from every angle, and not just addiction, but relationship failure, mental illness, PTSD, gambling, sex, any of those things that become destructive to us. I said it before, I think on the intro, but I'll say it again. As a rescuer, I found that I could not talk to my colleagues, because when we would go on those overdose calls overnight, on the night shift, back to back to back, hadn't eaten dinner, we're tired, we've been working a million hours because we're not getting paid enough to pay our bills, and we're working 3 or 4 jobs, we're exhausted, we're tired, we're cranky. I'm going on overdose calls and my partner's complaining and screaming, saying, man, why do we got to go save this junkie? And I'm sitting there thinking in my head, if only he knew who he was sitting next to. Because guess what? We were just at that other patient's house, and that bottle of Vicodin they had in the bathroom cabinet is in my pocket. If they only knew. So I knew that I couldn't talk about it. And that's not okay. Now, is that something to be proud of or to get a trophy for? Of course not. not at all. But we are human beings underneath the lab coats, underneath the fatigues, underneath the fire gear, the badges, the uniforms, the lights, the sirens, the scrubs, whatever. We are human beings, and we have to accept the fact that our circumstances, our professions may be different, but our human behaviors and our ways of adapting and coping are always the same. A lot of them are the same, similar. You know, when I worked overnight shift, we had a bar that would open for us at 7 o'clock in the morning for all the night shift cops, the firemen, the nurses, the medics. They would open up at 7 o'clock in the morning for the night shift because we would call it going to church. We're going to drink. We're going to, for whatever reason, we're going to drink. If it's to tell war stories or to cope with emotional pain, physical pain, whatever, we all drink, and that's acceptable because it's socially acceptable. And I'm not saying everybody can't drink. I'm not saying that I can't drink. I'm not saying that I can. What I am saying is we need to start addressing these things. We need to be able to freely be able to talk about these things, or at least address them, because the things that we don't address are the things that are killing us, or killing our families, or killing our marriages, or killing our children, or any number of things, killing our careers, any number of things. So that's who I am. I'm a man in recovery today. I still address those issues every day. I'm not perfect. I don't plan to ever be. I don't expect to ever be. I'm just a man. Okay. I'm a man who's had a lot of experience from the professional standpoint. I've walked the streets I've walked the streets in the professional world, and I've also walked them as a desperate, hopeless person that was afraid, scared to death. My last day when I went and got heroin for one of the last times, I remember going into Camden, and it was the depression and the despair was so bad that I remember driving into the projects, and I said to myself, I'm going to find the biggest, scariest dude I can find. I'm going to insult him, and I pray that he kills me. That's how bad it was. I have kids. I had some family relationships that were still somewhat stable, somewhat alive, people at that point, but I didn't care. And it's not because I didn't really care. It was because everything had taken over. I was caught up, and I didn't know a way out. I found ways out. I started addressing those things in many different ways. And again, we'll talk about all of them in the upcoming weeks and months. I hope to get to know you all. I hope that me telling you all of this stuff has given you some insight into who I am and why I'm so passionate, because I found peace. I sleep at night. I don't pass out. I don't black out. I go to sleep. And I believe that I was spared from all of that to be able to use my voice and my willingness to be very transparent and very open and naked with all of you, so you can gain your own voice and start addressing your stuff, or helping somebody you know address theirs. I can't wait to see what's going to come next. I'll talk to you guys soon. Hey everyone, thanks again for listening. I really hope it'll help you or your loved one. If you get a chance, I really would appreciate it if you could head over to iTunes and Apple Podcasts and leave a review. It will really help me out in many ways. Take care everyone, and remember, you are not alone in your struggle.
I want to give a big shout out to one of our supporters, the Addictions Academy. The Addictions Academy is the world's foremost accredited trainer of addiction coaches, addiction counselors, interventionists, and international master addiction coaches, offering on-site training at your rehab or facility, live virtual classroom webinars, or on-demand classes covering an extensive availability of courses and certifications. Check them out at theaddictionsacademy.com or call Dr. Callie Estes and her team at 1-800-706-0318.
Thanks Thanks for listening to Rescue the Rescuer. For show notes and more, head on over to rescuetherescuer.com.
We are a part of the Mental Health News Radio Network.com. This show is produced by James Healy of RecoveryInnovators.com. If you have a message and want to start a show of your own, contact him and let him know that we sent you.